In a large corporation, a candidate was rejected based on her appearance before she even spoke a word. However, her talent and intelligence caught the attention of a powerful man. What seemed like a simple hiring turned into an event that would change lives forever. When the secrets behind this decision came to light, no one was prepared for the truth. Before diving into this inspiring story, get ready to challenge your own concepts of success and appearance. Morgan Roberts nervously adjusted the collar of her blouse while waiting in the reception area of Horizon Construction, one of the largest companies in the country. Her fingers instinctively traced the scars that marked her face, a habit she had developed since the accident in her adolescence. The marks, which extended from her left temple to her chin, were impossible to hide, but they in no way diminished her professional competence. On the other side of the spacious executive lobby, Amanda Sullivan, assistant to the Human Resources Director, observed the candidate with a mixture of discomfort and disapproval. Her eyes repeatedly scanned the impeccable resume in her hands and the figure seated in the waiting area, as if there was some error in that equation. "Dr. Costa, with all due respect, we cannot proceed with this interview," whispered Amanda, hurriedly entering the HR director's office. "The candidate, she has severe facial deformities. This goes against the entire image we've built for the company." Richard Costa, a middle-aged man with graying hair at his temples and perceptive eyes, looked up from the documents he was analyzing. "Amanda, did you read her resume?" "Yes, but..." "Then you must have noticed that Morgan has 2 degrees with honors, speaks 4 languages fluently, and has international experience in project management. Exactly the profile we're looking for the position of executive assistant to the president." "But, Dr. Costa, she'll be dealing directly with important clients, investors. Don't you think this might harm our corporate image?" Richard took a deep breath, adjusting his glasses. "Amanda, you know Mr. Edward Santos's guidelines, our president. Competence and qualifications are our only selection criteria. Please ask Ms. Roberts to come in." Reluctantly, Amanda headed to the reception area. Morgan immediately noticed the veiled hostility in the assistant's tone when calling her. Years of prejudice had made her especially sensitive to these nuances. Upon entering the HR director's office, Morgan maintained the professional demeanor that had always characterized her. Richard noticed how she held her gaze firmly, without trying to hide her scars, an attitude that demonstrated self-confidence and maturity. "Ms. Roberts, impressive resume," Richard began, genuinely interested. "Tell me about your experience in international project management." During the next hour, Morgan demonstrated not only her exceptional technical knowledge, but also sharp intelligence and remarkable articulation ability. She spoke about the challenges she faced coordinating multicultural teams, her vision on corporate innovation, and the strategies she developed to optimize business processes. "I imagine you've faced challenging situations in corporate environments," commented Richard, carefully choosing his words. Morgan smiled serenely. "Dr. Costa, I learned early on that my appearance can cause initial discomfort in some people, but I also learned that competence and professionalism always speak louder. I don't allow external scars to define who I am or limit my professional capacity." The response impressed Richard. He had interviewed dozens of candidates for the position, but none had demonstrated such emotional maturity combined with technical competence. At the end of the interview, Richard was certain of his decision. He just needed to convince the president, Edward Santos, known for his perfectionism and high standards. What Richard didn't know was that this recommendation would trigger a series of events that would transform not only Morgan's life, but the entire culture of the company. As Morgan said goodbye, Amanda observed through the half-open door, her fingers nervously drumming on the desk. Something told her that this candidate represented a threat to her comfort zone, and she wasn't willing to accept changes so easily. The afternoon sun penetrated through the office windows, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor. Richard organized his notes, preparing to defend his choice before the president. He was aware that he was about to initiate a battle that went far beyond a simple hiring. It was a matter of principles, of breaking paradigms entrenched in the corporate world. Edward Santos remained silent for long minutes, analyzing the resume and interview notes that Richard had presented. The president of Horizon Construction was known for his analytical ability and precise decisions, characteristics that had led him to the top of one of the largest companies in the country. "And you say she speaks Mandarin fluently?" asked Edward, finally breaking the silence in his spacious office on the top floor of the building. "Yes, in addition to English, Spanish, and French. Morgan lived for 2 years in Shanghai, leading expansion projects for a multinational," replied Richard, aware that the president's interest went beyond professional qualifications. Edward rose from his leather armchair and walked to the panoramic window, observing the New York City skyline. His thoughts wandered to Helen, his sister-in-law, who had been living as a recluse in her Upper East Side mansion for years. The scars she carried, since the accident that also claimed her twin sister, Laura, Edward's wife, had become invisible prisons. "You mentioned that she has significant facial marks," commented Edward, still with his back to Richard. "Yes, sir. But her attitude towards this is admirable. During the interview, she demonstrated exceptional confidence and maturity." Edward turned around, a different gleam in his eyes. "Hire her, immediately." The decision surprised even Richard, who expected to need to argue more. "Sir, I should warn you that some board members may question—" "Richard," interrupted Edward, "I've been running this company for 15 years, making decisions that many questioned. And do you know why we continue to grow? Because I see potential where others see limitations." The next day, news of Morgan's hiring as the new executive assistant to the president caused exactly the stir that Richard had predicted. Amanda, in particular, couldn't hide her indignation. "It's absurd," she exclaimed to a group of colleagues in the break room. "How are we going to explain this to clients? To investors?" Meanwhile, Morgan was preparing for her first day. In her modest Brooklyn apartment, she carefully chose a navy blue business suit and tied her hair in an elegant bun. Years of experience had taught her that first impressions, especially in her case, needed to be impeccable. Upon arriving at Horizon Construction, Morgan was greeted by Richard, who escorted her directly to the president's office. In the elevator, he tried to prepare her. "Mr. Santos can seem intimidating initially, but he's a fair man." Edward was standing when Morgan entered his office. Their eyes met, and for a moment he saw in her the same spark of determination he had so admired in his sister-in-law Helen before the accident. "Ms. Roberts," he began, "your role here will be more than simply executive assistance. I need someone who thinks strategically, who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo." "That's exactly how I've built my career, Mr. Santos," replied Morgan with conviction. "Each obstacle I've faced has made me stronger and more determined." Edward smiled, for the first time in a long time, feeling that he had made not only a sound professional decision, but also taken a first step towards something greater. "There's a special project I want you to lead," he said, picking up a folder from his desk. "But first I need you to meet someone who could benefit greatly from your experience." Morgan sensed that there was something deeper behind those words, but maintained her professional demeanor. "I'm at your disposal, sir." Meanwhile, in the HR department, Amanda was furiously typing on her computer, researching every detail of Morgan's past. Her determination to find something that could question that hiring was evident. "She won't last a week," she muttered to herself, not noticing that Richard was observing her from the door of his office, concerned about the climate that was beginning to form. The day proceeded with Morgan familiarizing herself with her new responsibilities. Her efficiency and professionalism began to catch the attention of colleagues, even those initially skeptical. During a video conference with Chinese investors, her fluency in Mandarin impressed everyone, especially when she managed to resolve an impasse that had been dragging on for weeks. At the end of the workday, Edward called Morgan into his office. Again. "Tomorrow I'd like you to accompany me on a special visit," he said, a different tone in his voice. "There's someone who really needs to meet you." Morgan nodded, intrigued by the mystery in the president's words. As she organized her desk to leave, she didn't notice Amanda observing her attentively through the glass partitions. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. The first day was over, but it was just the beginning of a journey that would change not only Morgan's life but everyone around her. What no one knew was that Edward Santos had much bigger plans than simply hiring a new executive assistant. The next morning, Morgan found Edward in the reception area of Horizon Construction. The president, normally formal and reserved, seemed strangely anxious. "Good morning, Ms. Roberts. Ready for our special visit?" he asked, guiding her to his private car, a black executive sedan. During the journey, Edward remained silent, responding only with monosyllables to Morgan's attempts to initiate a professional conversation. She noticed that they were leaving the financial district, entering the city's affluent neighborhoods. Finally, the car stopped in front of an imposing mansion on the Upper East Side. The gates opened automatically, and Edward drove the vehicle down a long driveway lined with century-old trees. "Mr. Santos, forgive me for asking, but what kind of meeting will we have here?" inquired Morgan, her curiosity finally overcoming her professionalism. Edward turned off the engine and turned to her, his expression serious. "Morgan, what I'm going to ask of you now goes beyond your professional duties. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, please let me know." Intrigued, Morgan nodded. They got out of the car and headed to the mansion's entrance. A middle-aged housekeeper received them, her gaze alternating between Edward and Morgan with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Miss Helen is in the library, Mr. Edward," the housekeeper informed. Edward guided Morgan through the corridors of the house, decorated with discreet luxury, but with an air of abandonment, as if time had stopped inside. Upon reaching the library, Edward knocked softly on the door before opening it. Seated in an armchair near the window, a woman of approximately 50 was reading a book. Upon hearing the door, she looked up, and Morgan felt a tightness in her chest. The right side of the woman's face was marked by deep scars, similar to her own. "Helen, I've brought someone for you to meet," said Edward gently. Helen looked at Morgan, her eyes widening in surprise and then recognition. It was as if she were seeing herself in a mirror years ago. "Hello," said Morgan softly, taking a step forward. "I'm Morgan Roberts, Mr. Santos's new assistant." Helen remained silent for a moment, her eyes scanning Morgan's face. Then, to Edward's surprise, she stood up and walked toward the young woman. "Welcome, Morgan," said Helen, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Please sit down. I think we have a lot to talk about." The next few hours were a revelation for everyone. Helen, who had been living as a recluse for years, began to open up. She told about the car accident that took the life of her twin sister, Laura, Edward's wife, and left her with deep scars, both physical and emotional. Morgan, in turn, shared her own journey. The accident in adolescence, the years of reconstruction, not just physical but of her self-esteem and confidence. How she decided that she wouldn't let the scars define who she was or what she could achieve. "You know, Helen," said Morgan at one point, "our scars are maps of where we've been, not limits to where we can go." The words seemed to touch something deep in Helen. For the first time in years, Edward saw a spark of life in his sister-in-law's eyes. Meanwhile, at Horizon Construction, the absence of Morgan and the president did not go unnoticed. Amanda, in particular, was determined to discover what was happening. "Richard," she approached the HR director in his office, "don't you find it strange that Mr. Santos left with the newcomer on her second day here?" Richard sighed, tired of Amanda's insinuations. "The president has the autonomy to conduct business as he sees fit, Amanda. I suggest you focus on your own duties." Frustrated, Amanda returned to her desk, more determined than ever to find something that could discredit Morgan. Back at the mansion, the conversation between Helen, Morgan, and Edward took an unexpected turn. "Edward," said Helen, a new determination in her voice, "I think it's time for me to come back." Edward looked at his sister-in-law, surprised. "Come back, you mean?" "To the company," completed Helen. "Laura and I always dreamed of working together at Horizon Construction. I think it's time to realize that dream, even if she's no longer here." Morgan observed the exchange between the two, realizing she was witnessing a crucial moment. Edward seemed moved, but also concerned. "Helen, are you sure? The corporate world can be merciless." That's why I need the help of both of you, replied Helen, looking at Morgan. Morgan, you showed me today that it's possible to face the world with our scars. I'd like you to help me reintegrate into the company. Morgan felt the weight of responsibility, but also a wave of enthusiasm. It would be an honor, Helen. I believe that together we can do a lot for Horizon Construction. Edward looked at the two women before him, a feeling of hope growing in his chest. He had always known that hiring Morgan could be transformative, but he hadn't imagined how quickly and deeply that transformation would begin. Well, he finally said, it seems we have a new project on our hands. Helen's reintegration into the company, and perhaps a reformulation of our corporate culture. As the three began to outline the next steps, none of them could predict the challenges they would face. At Horizon Construction, opposing forces were already moving, and the journey they were about to embark on would test not only their professional skills, but also their resilience and humanity. The sun was beginning to set when Morgan and Edward left the mansion. In the car, returning to the city, both were immersed in thoughts about the changes that were on the horizon. For Morgan, it was more than a professional challenge. It was an opportunity to use her own journey to inspire and transform lives. Little did they know that, while they were making plans for renewal, others were plotting to maintain the status quo at any cost. The following weeks at Horizon Construction were marked by an atmosphere of expectation and tension. The news that Helen Santos, the president's sister-in-law and heir to a significant portion of the company's shares, would return after years of seclusion, spread like wildfire through the corporate corridors. Morgan, now fully established in her role as executive assistant, divided her time between her regular responsibilities and preparing for Helen's reintegration. She knew that the challenge went far beyond simply presenting spreadsheets and reports. It was about rebuilding the confidence of a woman who had spent years hidden from the world. On a particularly busy afternoon, Morgan was surprised by a phone call from Helen. "Morgan, I don't know if I can do this," Helen's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "What if everyone just stares at me? What if I can't handle the responsibilities?" Morgan closed her office door, seeking privacy. "Helen, take a deep breath. Remember what we talked about. Your scars are part of your story, not definers of your future. As for the responsibilities, you have the knowledge and experience. The rest we'll learn together." After a few minutes of reassuring conversation, Helen seemed to calm down. "Thank you, Morgan. I don't know what I'd do without your support." As she hung up, Morgan noticed Amanda standing near her door with a curious expression. "Problems with the mysterious new executive?" she asked, a tone of false concern in her voice. "Nothing we can't resolve, Amanda," replied Morgan diplomatically. "Mrs. Santos is just anxious about her return." Amanda nodded, but her eyes sparkled with a mixture of suspicion and interest. As soon as Morgan turned away, she quickly moved away, her mind already scheming how she could use this information. Meanwhile, on the president's floor, Edward was facing his own challenges. In a tense meeting with the board of directors, he was presenting his vision for the company's future. "Gentlemen, Helen's return is not just a family matter. It's an opportunity to show the market that Horizon Construction is a company that values diversity and inclusion," Edward argued. Charles Miller, one of the oldest directors, didn't seem convinced. "Edward, I understand your position, but we need to think about the company's image. How will our clients and partners react to an executive who's been out of the market for years and who, well, has an appearance that might cause discomfort?" The comment made Edward's blood boil, but he maintained his composure. "Charles, it's exactly this type of thinking that we need to change. Helen's experience and knowledge are invaluable. As for her appearance, I believe it will show our strength as a company that goes beyond appearances." The discussion extended for hours, with divided opinions. In the end, Edward got approval for Helen's return, but he knew the battle was far from over. The next morning, Horizon Construction was buzzing with preparations for Helen's arrival. Morgan coordinated every detail, from the organization of the office to a small welcome event. When Helen finally arrived, accompanied by Edward, the main lobby fell silent. Dressed in an elegant grey suit, She walked with a mixture of nervousness and determination. Morgan quickly approached, offering an encouraging smile. "Welcome back, Mrs. Santos," said Morgan in a loud voice, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Her actions seemed to awaken the other employees, who began to approach to greet the newcomer. Helen, initially tense, began to relax as she exchanged words with former colleagues and met new faces. Edward observed the scene with a mixture of pride and relief. His gaze crossed with Morgan's, and they exchanged a knowing smile. The first step had been taken successfully. However, not everyone shared the optimism. In a corner of the lobby, Amanda observed everything with critical eyes, her cell phone discreetly pointed at the scene. With a malicious smile, she sent a message to a contact saved as external source. "I have interesting information about the new executive at Horizon Construction. Can we meet?" As the day progressed, Helen familiarized herself with her new routine. Morgan was constantly by her side, guiding her about changes in the company and helping her reconnect with old projects. During a coffee break, Helen confided to Morgan, "You know, when I walked in this morning, for a moment I thought about turning around and running away, but then I saw you there, so confident and determined. It was like seeing the person I want to become again." Morgan felt. Her eyes filled with tears. "Helen, you already are that person. You just needed to remember it." The moment was interrupted by Edward, who hurriedly entered the break room. "Ladies, we need to talk. I just received a concerning call from the legal department." The two women exchanged apprehensive looks. Edward's tone indicated that the challenges were just beginning. As they followed him to the president's office, neither of them noticed Amanda observing them from afar, a satisfied smile on her lips. The afternoon that would follow would prove to be a trial by fire for Helen's determination, Morgan's loyalty, and Edward's vision for the future of Horizon Construction. The waves of change they had initiated were about to transform into a real corporate storm. The meeting in the president's office had a tense air. Edward, Helen, and Morgan were poring over documents spread across the mahogany table, their grave expressions reflecting the seriousness of the situation. "A discrimination lawsuit?" Helen repeated incredulously, her voice trembling. "But how? Why?" Edward sighed heavily. "Apparently, a former employee is claiming that he was fired for not fitting into the company's new image standards. He specifically cites your hiring, Helen, as proof of an alleged discriminatory policy." Morgan frowned, her analytical mind already at work. "This doesn't make sense. Helen's hiring, if anything, shows just the opposite. We're promoting inclusion, not discrimination." "Exactly," agreed Edward. "But the way the story is being told in the media is concerning." He turned his laptop, showing the two women a recently published article in one of the country's main news portals. The headline screamed, "Construction giant accused of reverse discrimination. Normal employees feel threatened." Helen felt the blood freeze in her veins. "My God, Edward, I knew my return would cause a stir, but this is too much." Morgan placed a reassuring hand on Helen's shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. This is clearly an attempt to destabilize the company and undermine the changes we're implementing." Edward nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and determination. "Morgan is right. We can't back down now. We need to face this head-on." While the three discussed strategies to deal with the crisis outside the president's office, the news was spreading like wildfire among the employees. Groups formed in the corridors and in the break room, whispering and speculating about the company's future. Amanda, in particular, seemed strangely satisfied with the chaos that was setting in. She circulated among the groups, fueling rumors and insinuations. "I heard they're going to fire half the marketing department," she whispered to a group of anxious colleagues. "Apparently they're not diverse enough." Amanda's words, though unfounded, fell on fertile ground. Fear and uncertainty were palpable in the air. Back in the president's office, the team was drawing up an action plan. "We need to be transparent," argued Morgan. "Let's go public and explain our vision of inclusion and diversity. Show that it's not about favoring one group to the detriment of another, but about creating equal opportunities for everyone." Helen, who had been quiet until then, looked up. There was a new gleam of determination in her eyes. "I want to speak," she declared, surprising Edward and Morgan. "Helen, are you sure?" asked Edward, concerned. "Media exposure can be merciless." "I am," she replied firmly. "If we're going to defend the idea that appearance doesn't define competence, I need to be the first to step forward. I can't hide behind press releases." Morgan smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and admiration for Helen's strength. "I think it's a great idea. Your story can inspire many and change the narrative." Edward agreed, though there was still concern in his eyes. "All right, we'll organize a press conference. But first, we need to prepare the ground internally well." In the days that followed, Horizon Construction transformed into an ideological battlefield. On one side, led by Edward, Helen, and Morgan, were those who embraced the vision of a more inclusive and diverse company. On the other, a more conservative group who feared changes and clung to the status quo. Amanda, sensing the opportunity to advance her own agenda, began to position herself as an informal spokesperson for the discontented. She organized secret meetings after hours, where she fed the fears and insecurities of her colleagues. "They say it's about inclusion," she discoursed to a group gathered in the company's garage, "but they're actually creating a hostile environment for us. Normal employees. How long until they start replacing us?" Meanwhile, Morgan worked tirelessly to prepare Helen for the press conference. They spent hours reviewing key points, practicing responses to possible difficult questions, and most importantly, strengthening Helen's confidence. "Remember," Morgan said during one of these sessions, "your story is powerful. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Show them the strong and capable woman you are." On the eve of the conference, Edward convened a general meeting with all employees. The company's auditorium was packed, the air heavy with tension and expectation. "I know the last few days have been turbulent," he began, his voice echoing through the microphone. "Changes always bring uncertainties, but I want to assure all of you, our mission is to create an environment where each of you, regardless of appearance, origin, or any other characteristic, can reach your full potential." As Edward spoke, Helen and Morgan observed the audience's reactions. Some faces showed approval, others skepticism, and some, like Amanda's, barely hid hostility. At the end of the speech, Edward made a surprising announcement. "Tomorrow, at our press conference, I will not be the company's main spokesperson. That honor will belong to our newest innovation director, Helen Santos." A murmur ran through the auditorium. Helen felt all eyes turn to her. For a moment, the old fear threatened to dominate her, but then she felt Morgan's hand squeeze hers in a gesture of silent support. Taking a deep breath, Helen stood up. Walking to the stage, she faced for the first time the collective gaze of hundreds of employees. Her heart was racing, but her voice came out firm. "Hello, everyone. Tomorrow, I'll share with the press my story and our vision for the future. But today I want to share something even more important, my commitment to each of you. I'm here not to take anyone's place, but to add, to show that together in our diversity we are stronger." Her words seemed to touch something deep in the audience. Even the most skeptical found themselves reflecting on the meaning of that moment. As the auditorium slowly emptied, Morgan noticed Amanda leaving hurriedly, cell phone in hand. Something in her posture left Morgan uneasy. Night was falling over New York City, and in the homes of Horizon Construction employees, heated conversations were happening about the company's future. In the Santos mansion, Helen rehearsed her speech once more, determined to make a difference. The stage was set for a day that promised to change not only the course of Horizon Construction, but perhaps the entire American corporate market. The storm was about to reach its peak, and no one knew for sure what the dawn would bring. The morning of the press conference arrived with a palpable mix of anxiety and expectation. The main lobby of Horizon Construction had been transformed into a setting worthy of the largest television networks, with cameras, lights, and an audience composed of journalists from across the country. Helen, dressed in an elegant navy blue ensemble, waited backstage, her heart beating rapidly. Morgan was by her side, offering words of encouragement. "Remember, Helen," Morgan said softly, You're not here just for yourself. You're representing all people who have ever felt invisible or underestimated because of their appearance." Helen nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Morgan. I don't know if I would be here without you." From across the lobby, Amanda observed the scene with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. Her cell phone vibrated with a message, "All set, awaiting your signal." She smiled discreetly, putting the device in her pocket. Her plan was in motion. At 10 o'clock sharp, Edward took the stage to open the conference. "Good morning, everyone. I appreciate the presence of the press and our collaborators. Today, Horizon Construction takes an important step toward a more inclusive and diverse future. It is with great pride that I present our new Innovation Director, Helen Santos." Murmur ran through the audience when Helen took the stage. Cameras flashed, capturing every detail of her marked face. For a moment, the old fear threatened to overtake her, but then she saw Morgan in the front row, nodding encouragingly. "Good morning," Helen began, her voice initially trembling but gaining strength with each word. "My name is Helen Santos, and my story with Horizon Construction began more than 2 decades ago, long before these scars." She paused, her eyes scanning the audience. "Many of you must be wondering, why is someone who spent years away from the spotlight here today? The answer is simple and complex at the same time. Because it's time to change the narrative." Helen then dove into her personal story, talking about the accident, the years of seclusion, and the journey of rediscovering herself. Her voice carried emotion, but also a strength that captivated everyone present. "Today I'm here not just as an executive, but as a symbol that competence, dedication, and human value go far beyond physical appearance. Horizon Construction is committed to creating an environment where each individual can reach their full potential, regardless of their external characteristics." As Helen spoke, it was possible to see the change in the expressions of the journalists. The initial skepticism gave way to genuine interest and even admiration. However, in the middle of the question and answer session, a journalist raised an unexpected question. "Mrs. Santos, how do you respond to accusations that your hiring is part of a company marketing strategy to divert attention from discriminatory practices?" A tense silence fell over the auditorium. Helen felt the blood freeze in her veins, but before she could respond, Morgan stood up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm. "As executive assistant to the president and an integral part of this process of change, I would like to address this question." Edward, surprised, nodded, allowing Morgan to take the microphone. "Mrs. Santos's hiring is not a marketing strategy, but a genuine reflection of the values we are implementing at Horizon Construction," declared Morgan. "I myself am a living example of this. As you can see, I also carry visible scars, and it was thanks to this company's inclusive vision that I had the opportunity to show my professional worth." Morgan's revelation caused a commotion. The camera flashes intensified, capturing the moment when 2 women, marked in different ways by life, united in defense of a vision of equality and inclusion. Amanda, who was observing everything from afar, felt her plan crumble. The narrative she had hoped to build of an opportunistic company was being replaced by a story of genuine overcoming and transformation. As the press conference came to an end, it was clear that something bigger than a simple corporate change was happening. Horizon Construction was becoming the epicenter of a movement that could transform the country's business culture. In the days that followed, the headlines in newspapers and online portals didn't talk about scandals or controversies, but about the courage of 2 women who defied standards and paved the way for a new era of inclusion in the corporate world. Helen and Morgan, exhausted but fulfilled, met at the end of that day in Edward's office. "You 2 were simply extraordinary," said the president, a genuine smile on his tired face. "I think we underestimated the impact this change would have." Helen smiled, tears of relief and happiness in her eyes. "Thank you, Edward, for believing in me. And Morgan, I have no words to thank you for your support." Morgan squeezed Helen's hand. "We're together on this journey, and this is just the beginning." As the 2 women embraced, Edward couldn't help but think that he was witnessing the birth of something truly transformative. The storm they feared had transformed into a wave of positive change. However, in a dark corner of the company's parking lot, Amanda was having a heated conversation on the phone. "No, don't give up yet. This is just a setback. We have to find another way to expose the truth behind this facade of inclusion." The battle for the soul of Horizon Construction was far from over. While some celebrated the dawn of a new era, others prepared to defend the status quo at all costs. The next chapter of this story promised to be even more intense and revealing. In the weeks following the press conference, Horizon Construction experienced an unprecedented transformation. Helen's courageous speech and Morgan's unexpected intervention had not only neutralized the crisis, but catapulted the company to the center of a national debate on inclusion and diversity in the corporate environment. The office buzzed with a new energy. Employees who previously felt invisible or marginalized began to speak up, sharing their own stories of overcoming. The company's culture was changing, slowly but noticeably. Helen, now firmly established, in her role as innovation director, led a series of revolutionary initiatives. Her personal experience brought a unique perspective to accessibility and inclusive design projects in the company's developments. Imagine buildings that not only house, but truly welcome people of all abilities and characteristics, she explained in a board meeting. "We're not just building structures, we're shaping the future of society." Morgan, in turn, had become a respected and admired figure in the company. Her courage in exposing herself publicly inspired others to embrace their own uniqueness. She now led a mentoring program for employees, helping them overcome personal and professional barriers. However, not everything was rosy. Amanda, frustrated with the failure of her initial plan, had not given up. She continued to sow doubts and insecurities among some employees, especially those who feared that the new inclusion policy might threaten their positions. On a particularly tense afternoon, Amanda confronted Morgan in the HR department corridor. "You may have fooled everyone with this little show of overcoming," she hissed, "but I know there's more to this story than you're telling." Morgan remained calm. Years of facing prejudice had given her an unshakable inner strength. "Amanda, I understand your fears. Changes always scare. But why not join us? There's room for everyone in this new vision." Amanda laughed sarcastically. "Spare me your motivational speeches. You won't last long. Wait and see." Meanwhile, Edward faced his own challenges. Some investors, concerned about the radical change in the company's image, pressed for guarantees that profitability would not be affected. "Edward," said one of the main shareholders during a video conference, "we understand the importance of social responsibility, but our priority should be financial return." Edward, seated in his office with a view of the city, responded with conviction, "Gentlemen, what we're doing is not only morally right, it's strategically intelligent. In an increasingly conscious world, inclusive and diverse companies have a competitive advantage. Our numbers are already beginning to reflect this." Indeed, the first results were promising. The positive publicity generated by the company's new stance had attracted new clients and partners. Innovative projects led by Helen were winning important bids. One of these projects, a residential complex fully adapted for people with different needs, became the flagship of Horizon Construction's new phase. Helen and Morgan worked tirelessly, consulting experts and groups of people with disabilities to ensure that every detail was designed with inclusion in mind. During a visit to the construction site of this development, Helen had a moment of epiphany. Observing the skeleton of what would be a truly inclusive building, she turned to Morgan, tears in her eyes. "You know, for years I hid from the world, thinking there was no place for someone like me. Now we're literally building that place, not just for us, but for so many others." Morgan smiled, moved. "It's amazing how our scars, which once made us feel excluded, are now the source of our strength to include." The moment was interrupted by Morgan's cell phone. It was Edward, his voice urgent. "We need you both at the office immediately. We have a situation." Upon arriving at the company headquarters, they found Edward in a tense meeting with the legal team. The reason soon became clear. A group of employees, led by none other than Amanda, had filed a class action lawsuit against the company, alleging reverse discrimination. They claim that the new hiring and promotion policies are disadvantaging employees without diverse characteristics, explained the chief lawyer, clearly uncomfortable. Helen felt her stomach sink. This is absurd. Our policies are about creating equal opportunities, not privileging one group over another. Edward sighed heavily. Unfortunately, perception is reality for many. We need to handle this quickly and decisively. Morgan, who had been silent, finally spoke. Maybe this is an opportunity. All eyes turned to her, intrigued. What if, instead of facing this in the courts, we invited these employees to an open dialogue, show them in practice how our policies benefit everyone? Morgan's suggestion caught everyone by surprise, but soon the room was filled with renewed energy. It was a risky approach, but aligned with the company's new values. Let's do this, decided Edward. Organize an open forum with all employees, complete transparency. As the team dispersed to prepare for the event, Helen pulled Morgan aside. You continue to surprise me. How do you manage to maintain calm and clarity in moments like this? Morgan smiled, a determined gleam in her eyes. Because I know that what we're doing is bigger than us. It's about changing mindsets, one person at a time. The two women embraced, aware that they were at the epicenter of a transformation that went far beyond the walls of Horizon Construction. It was a battle for the soul of the corporate world, and they were determined to win. As the sun set over New York City, casting long shadows through the corridors of the company, the team worked deep into the night, preparing for what promised to be one of the most decisive days in the history of Horizon Construction. The open forum would not only be a test for the company's new policies, but a moment of truth for the entire society. The day of the open forum dawned with a palpable tension in the air. The main auditorium of Horizon Construction, normally used for project presentations and shareholder meetings, had been transformed into an arena of dialogue. Chairs were arranged in a circle, eliminating any sense of hierarchy, a symbolic decision proposed by Morgan. Employees from all levels and departments began to arrive, their faces a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and, in some cases, poorly disguised hostility. Amanda entered accompanied by a group of colleagues, their challenging looks directed at Helen and Morgan, who were conversing in low voices near the stage. Edward, wearing a more casual suit than usual, began the forum. Good morning, everyone. We are here today because we believe in the power of open and honest dialogue. There are no taboos, no forbidden questions. This is a safe space to express our concerns, fears, and hopes for the future of our company. Helen was the next to speak, her voice firm but gentle. I know that many of you have doubts and concerns about the changes we are implementing. I want you to know that I understand you. Change is always challenging, but I believe that together we can build something extraordinary. The silence that followed was broken by a voice from the back of the auditorium. It was Charles, a senior engineer with more than 2 decades at the company. With all due respect, Mrs. Santos, but since this new inclusion policy began, I have the impression that experienced professionals like me are being sidelined in favor of, well, people who fit the new image of the company. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the room. Amanda smiled discreetly, satisfied to see her seeds of discord germinating. Morgan stepped forward, her demeanor calm but determined. Charles, I appreciate your honesty. I can understand how you feel, but I'd like to propose a reflection. Have you ever in your long and successful career felt that you didn't have an opportunity because of your appearance or some personal characteristic? Charles hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. Well, no. That's exactly what we're talking about, continued Morgan. Our policy isn't about privileging one group over another, but about ensuring that everyone has the same opportunities that you've always had. The room fell silent, absorbing Morgan's words. It was then that Lisa, a young architect recently hired, timidly raised her hand. I always dreamed of working for a large construction company, but in all the interviews I had before, I felt that my wheelchair was the only thing people saw. Here, for the first time, I feel I'm being evaluated for my work. not for my physical limitations. Lisa's testimony seemed to touch many of those present. Faces that were previously skeptical began to show signs of understanding. Amanda, realizing she was losing ground, decided to play her final card. This all sounds very nice, but let's talk numbers. How much is this inclusion policy costing? The company? Are we risking our financial stability because of a social fad? Edward, prepared for this question, projected a graph on the screen behind him. Actually, Amanda, since we implemented our new policies, we've seen a 15% increase in our overall productivity. Our innovative projects, led by diverse teams, have secured us 3 major contracts in the last few months. Inclusion isn't just morally right, it's excellent business. The revelation caused a buzz in the room. Even the most skeptical seemed impressed with the tangible results. Helen seized the moment to share. When I returned to work after years of seclusion, I was afraid of not being accepted, of no longer having a place in the corporate world. But I discovered that my experiences, including the difficult ones, gave me a unique perspective. And it's this diversity of perspectives that's driving our innovation. As the forum progressed, more employees began to share their stories. A war veteran spoke about how the adaptations made for Lisa also benefited him. A single mother thanked the flexible work policies that allowed her to balance career and family. Amanda, seeing her support group diminish, made one last attempt. What about those of us who don't fit into these special categories? Aren't we being harmed? It was then that Peter, one of the engineers who initially supported Amanda, surprised everyone. You know, Amanda, I used to think like you, but working on the inclusive residential complex project, I've learned more in the last few months than in years of my career. This diversity has made us think outside the box, solve problems in innovative ways. We're not being harmed, we're evolving. Peter's words seemed to break the last barriers. The room filled with a different energy, one of understanding and unity. Morgan, moved, concluded, "What we're building here goes beyond buildings and structures. We're building bridges between people, breaking down walls of prejudice. And this is only possible when each of us allows ourselves to see the unique value in each colleague." At the end of the forum, which extended for hours beyond what was planned, it was evident that a transformation had occurred. Employees who entered with suspicion left with a new understanding and, in many cases, enthusiasm for the company's inclusive vision. Edward, Helen, and Morgan gathered after the event, exhausted but fulfilled. "That was intense," said Helen, her tired smile on her face. "But necessary," completed Edward. "I think today we really began to change mindsets." Morgan nodded, looking out the window at the city that stretched beyond. "This is just the beginning. We have a long road ahead, but today we took a giant step." As the sun set over New York City, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers, the three felt they were on the threshold of something truly transformative. Horizon Construction wasn't just changing its internal culture, it was positioning itself to lead a revolution in the American corporate world. In the parking lot, Amanda was getting into her car, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The day hadn't gone as she had planned, and now she found herself at a crossroads. Resist change or embrace it? Her decision, like that of many others, would shape the future not only of the company, but of an entire generation of professionals. In the weeks following the forum, Horizon Construction experienced an almost palpable transformation. The air in the corridors seemed lighter, the interactions between colleagues more genuine. The seed planted on that day of confrontation and reconciliation was beginning to bear fruit, some unexpected. Morgan, arriving early at the office as usual, was surprised by an unusual scene. Amanda was helping Lisa, the young architect in a wheelchair, to adjust her workstation for greater comfort. "Good morning," said Morgan, unable to hide the surprise in her voice. "I see you've started the day on the right foot." Amanda turned, a mixture of embarrassment and determination on her face. "Morgan, I'd like to talk to you when you have a moment." Intrigued, Morgan nodded, inviting Amanda to her office. Once inside, Amanda seemed to struggle to find the right words. I've spent the last few days reflecting a lot on everything that was said at the forum, she began, her voice trembling slightly, and I realized that, well, that I was wrong, not just about the company's policies, but about you and Helen. Morgan listened in silence, allowing Amanda to continue. My fear of change, my insecurity, made me act in a way I'm not proud of. I wanted to apologize and, well, know if there's still room for me in this new Horizon construction. The silence that followed seemed eternal to Amanda. Morgan finally spoke, her voice gentle but firm. Amanda, the essence of what we're building here is precisely the idea that there's room for everyone. Your experience and skills are valuable. What we need is your willingness to embrace this new vision and contribute positively. The two women talked for more than an hour, sharing experiences and perspectives. At the end, they left the room not as rivals, but as colleagues with a new mutual understanding. Meanwhile, Helen was leading a crucial meeting with potential international investors. The inclusive residential complex project had attracted the attention of an investment fund focused on sustainable and socially responsible ventures. What? You're proposing isn't just a real estate development, commented Sarah Chen, the fund's representative. It's a model for the future of civil construction. Helen smiled, feeling the weight of that moment. Exactly, Ms. Chen. We're not just building structures, we're redefining the concept of home to truly include everyone. The presentation was a success, with the fund not only agreeing to invest in the project, but proposing a long-term partnership to expand the concept to other cities. Upon leaving the meeting room, Helen was approached by Edward. His face lit up with a proud smile. Helen, you just secured not only the largest investment in our company's history, but also positioned us as global leaders in inclusive construction. She nodded, moved. It's amazing to think how we got here, isn't it? A few months ago, I could barely leave the house. Edward placed a hand on her shoulder. And now you're changing the world, one project at a time. News of the investment spread quickly through the company, further boosting employee morale. In the project department, a contagious energy took over the team. Peter, the engineer who had changed his opinion during the forum, was leading a brainstorming session for new accessibility concepts. What if we think beyond physical adaptations, he proposed. We could integrate assistive technology directly into the structure of the buildings. Lisa, excited about the idea, added, imagine voice navigation systems integrated for visually impaired people or floors that change texture to indicate directions. The room buzzed with innovative ideas, each team member contributing their unique perspective. At the end of the day, Morgan found Helen in the company cafe, both exhausted but with a gleam of achievement in their eyes. I heard about the investment, said Morgan. Congratulations, Helen. You deserve it. Helen smiled, absently stirring her coffee. You know, there are moments when I still don't believe all this. It seems like it was just yesterday that I was hiding at home, afraid of the world. Morgan nodded, understanding. I know exactly how it is. But look at us now, leading a corporate revolution. The two laughed, the weight of their individual journeys mixing with the lightness of their recent achievements. Morgan, said Helen, suddenly serious, I think it's time we expanded this beyond Horizon construction. What happened here, other companies need to see that it's possible. Morgan leaned forward, intrigued. What do you have in mind? A business forum, replied Helen, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Invite leaders from other companies. Share our experience, show the tangible results of inclusion. The idea caught fire in Morgan's mind. We could transform this into a national movement of corporate inclusion. As they excitedly discussed the details of their new vision, they didn't. Notice Edward observing them from afar, a satisfied smile on his face. He knew he had made the right choice in bringing these two extraordinary women to lead the company. The sun was setting over New York City, casting a golden glow through the windows of Horizon construction. The day had been full of victories, big and small, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. That night, in homes and apartments throughout the city, Horizon construction employees shared with their families and friends the changes they were experiencing. stories of overcoming, of newly discovered understanding, of barriers broken down. The transformation that had begun within the walls of the company was beginning to spread, like ripples in a lake, touching lives and challenging entrenched prejudices. Horizon Construction wasn't just erecting buildings. It was building a new paradigm for the American corporate world. And as the city fell asleep, Helen and Morgan, in their respective homes, could hardly wait for dawn, eager to take the next step in their journey of change. The future, once uncertain and frightening, now shone with infinite possibilities. The auditorium of the New York City Convention Center was packed. A sea of expectant faces turned toward the stage. Executives from across the country, journalists, and even some politicians had gathered for the first national forum on corporate inclusion and diversity, organized by Horizon Construction. Helen, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, adjusted the microphone on her lapel, exchanging a confident look with Morgan, who was backstage. The nervousness that once paralyzed her in front of crowds had given way to a serene determination. "Good morning, everyone," began Helen, her firm voice echoing through the auditorium. "A year ago, I couldn't even leave my house. Today I stand before you not only as the director of one of the largest construction companies in the country, but as living proof of the transformative power of inclusion." A respectful silence fell over the audience as Helen shared her personal and professional journey. She spoke about the challenges faced, the changes implemented at Horizon Construction, and most importantly, the tangible results of those changes. Indeed, the last 6 months our productivity has increased by 25%. We've won international contracts that once seemed unattainable. But beyond the numbers, we've created an environment where each employee, regardless of their physical characteristics or background, feels they can fully contribute. Morgan watched proudly from backstage, remembering how it all began. Her gaze wandered over the audience, noting expressions of surprise, interest, and in some cases, skepticism. After Helen's speech, it was Edward's turn to take the stage. The president of Horizon Construction presented financial data and case studies that backed up everything Helen had said. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edward concluded, "inclusion is not just morally right, it's strategically intelligent. It's the future of business." The most impactful moment of the forum, however, was yet to come. Morgan, taking a deep breath, walked to the center of the stage. Her presence caused a murmur of surprise in the audience. Many there were seeing for the first time the face behind Horizon Construction's inclusion initiatives. "Good afternoon," began Morgan, her voice calm but laden with emotion. "My name is Morgan Roberts, and like Helen, I carry visible marks of my journey. But I'm here to talk about the invisible marks that all of us carry: prejudices, fears, insecurities." She then told the story of her personal transformation from an insecure young woman to a confident executive. But what really captured everyone's attention was when she spoke about Amanda. "One of our greatest victories wasn't a $1 million contract or an innovative project. It was the transformation of a colleague who initially resisted the changes, but who today is one of the greatest advocates of inclusion in our company." At the back of the auditorium, Amanda, who had insisted on coming to the forum, felt tears in her eyes. Her journey from antagonist to ally was a powerful testimony to the real impact of these policies. As the forum progressed, it became clear that what was happening there was more than a simple business conference. It was the birth of a movement. Executives from other companies began to share their own experiences and challenges. Questions were asked. Heated debates arose. The energy in the auditorium was palpable. During the break, Helen and Morgan were approached by numerous participants, all eager to know more, to understand how they could implement similar changes in their own organizations. "This is bigger than we imagined," whispered Helen to Morgan as they navigated through the crowd. Morgan nodded, a smile on her lips. "It's as if we've opened the floodgates. There's so much desire for change, so much thirst for a fairer and more inclusive work environment." The most surprising moment came when Mark Alvarez, CEO of one of Horizon Construction's largest competitors, approached them. "Ladies, he said, extending his hand. "I'm impressed with what you've accomplished. I'd like to propose a partnership. Imagine the impact we could have if the two largest construction companies in the country joined forces for this cause." Helen and Morgan exchanged looks of amazement and enthusiasm. The idea of a collaboration between competitors in the name of a greater good was revolutionary. Meanwhile, backstage, Edward was receiving an important call. It was the Secretary of Labor. "Mr. Santos," said the secretary, "what you're doing there is extraordinary. I'd like to invite you to a meeting in Washington. I believe we can transform these initiatives into public policies." The forum extended late into the night, with discussion panels, workshops, and networking. When it finally came to an end, there was a general feeling that something historic had happened there. Helen, Morgan, and Edward gathered in a private room, exhausted but exultant. "We did it," said Helen, her voice choked with emotion. "We really started a change." Edward smiled, looking at the two women with paternal pride. "You two did more than start. A change. You lit a flame that will illuminate the future of the American corporate world." Morgan, always pragmatic, already had a notebook in hand. "We have so much work ahead. Partnerships to establish, policies to refine, a national movement to coordinate." They laughed, the excitement of the moment mixed with the awareness of the challenges that were still to come. But there was a shared certainty. Together, they were capable of moving mountains. As they left the convention center, the New York night pulsed with possibilities. On the streets, billboards announced Horizon Construction's new inclusive projects. On social media, the hashtag #InclusionIsBusiness was becoming a trending topic. Helen paused for a moment, looking at the starry sky. "You know," she said to Morgan and Edward, "when I was a child, I dreamed of building castles. I think in a way we're doing exactly that, building a future where everyone has their place." The three smiled, united by the vision of a more inclusive and fair tomorrow. The journey was far from over, but each step brought them closer to a world where differences were not barriers, but bridges to a better future. And so, as the city continued its frantic rhythm, three figures walked side by side, their hearts full of hope and determination. The chapter they had closed that day was just the beginning of a much larger story, a story of transformation, courage, and above all, humanity. The months following the National Forum on Corporate Inclusion and Diversity were a whirlwind of activities for Helen, Morgan, and the entire Horizon Construction team. What had begun as an internal initiative had transformed into a national movement, with the company at the forefront of a revolution in American business. On a sunny spring morning, Helen entered the office to find Morgan already immersed in work, surrounded by piles of documents and with several windows open on her computer. "Good morning, Morgan," greeted Helen, placing 2 cups of coffee on the desk. "Looks like it was a long night." Morgan smiled, grateful for the caffeine. "Don't even mention it. I've been reviewing the proposals for the intercompany mentoring program. The demand is impressive." The program in question was one of the many initiatives born from the forum. Companies from across the country were requesting guidance from Horizon Construction to implement their own inclusion policies. "Speaking of demand," said Helen, sitting down, "I just received an interesting call. Guess who wants a personalized consultation?" Morgan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "The Federation of Industries," revealed Helen, a gleam of excitement in her eyes. "They want our help to develop a best practices guide in inclusion for the entire industrial sector." The news was monumental. The Federation of Industries represented one of the most traditional and historically least inclusive sectors in the country. "That's... wow," Morgan stammered, momentarily at a loss for words. "Helen, do you have any idea of the impact this could have?" Before they could elaborate further, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Amanda, carrying a thick folder. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her tone professional but friendly, a long way from the days of antagonism. "But I thought you'd like to see this immediately." She opened the folder, revealing dozens of printed letters and emails. These are testimonials from employees and their families about how the new inclusion policies have changed their lives. I thought we could use this in the social impact report." Helen and Morgan exchanged moved looks. What they had before them was tangible proof that their efforts were making a real difference in people's lives. "Amanda, this is amazing," said Helen, leafing through the documents. "Your idea to collect these testimonials was brilliant." Amanda blushed slightly at the compliment. Her journey of personal transformation was a reflection of the larger change occurring in the company and beyond. As the three women discussed how best to use this material, Edward entered the room, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. "Ladies, we have a situation," he announced. "I just got off a video call with the Secretary of Labor. The government is considering using our model as the basis for new labor inclusion legislation." The news fell like a bomb in the room. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a monumental challenge. "That's fantastic, Edward," exclaimed Morgan, "but also scary. Are we ready for this level of responsibility?" Helen, always the voice of reason, intervened. "Perhaps the question isn't whether we're ready, but whether we can afford not to accept this challenge. Think of the impact we could have on a national scale." The discussion that followed was intense. Each brought a unique perspective. Helen with her strategic vision, Morgan with her focus on practical implementation, Amanda with insights into employee concerns, and Edward balancing the implications for business and social responsibility. After hours of debate, they reached a consensus. They would accept the government's invitation, but with the condition that the process be collaborative, involving representatives from various sectors of society. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Horizon Construction became the epicenter of a silent revolution in the American corporate world. Helen led a series of workshops with CEOs of large companies, challenging entrenched prejudices and presenting success cases of inclusion. Morgan dove into creating a comprehensive manual of inclusive practices, working night after night to ensure that each recommendation was evidence-based and applicable in practice. Amanda, surprising everyone, became the crucial link with the frontline employees, ensuring that their voices and concerns were heard and incorporated into every decision. Edward, in turn, skillfully navigated the political world, building alliances and ensuring that the company's vision wasn't diluted in the legislative process. The inclusive residential complex project, now in its final phase of construction, became a tangible symbol of what was possible when inclusion was placed at the center of design and execution. On a sunny Saturday, the team gathered at the construction site for a special visit. Lisa, the young architect in a wheelchair, led the tour, her eyes shining with pride as she showed how every detail had been designed to be accessible and welcoming for all. "See," she said, indicating a set of apartments, "here we have units, adapted for different needs, but arranged so that there's no segregation. It's a true microcosm of an inclusive society." As they walked through the complex, Helen couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. From a reclusive woman to the leader of a national movement, her personal transformation mirrored that of the company, and now, potentially, the country. At the end of the tour, the team gathered in a rooftop garden with a view of the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. "Look at this," said Morgan, gesturing toward the New York City horizon. "A year ago, we could hardly imagine the impact we would have. And now we're literally changing the landscape of the city and the country." Edward, normally reserved, seemed moved. "You have all done something extraordinary here. We haven't just built buildings. We've built hope, opportunities, a better future." As the group shared a moment of silent reflection, Helen felt a wave of gratitude and purpose. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging, that there would be obstacles and resistances. But looking at the people around her, Morgan with her unwavering determination, Amanda with her inspiring transformation, Edward with his long-term vision, and the entire team that had embraced this journey, she knew they were prepared for any challenge. The sun finally set, but the gleam in the eyes of that group didn't diminish. They had lit a light of hope and change, a light that now spread far beyond the walls of Horizon Construction, illuminating the path to a more inclusive and fair future for all. A year had passed since that afternoon in the rooftop garden of the inclusive residential complex. Horizon Construction, once known only for its real estate developments, was now synonymous with social and business innovation throughout the United States. It was an autumn morning when Helen arrived at the office, the crisp air carrying a sense of expectation. Today was not an ordinary day. It was the day of the official inauguration of the new Horizon residential complex, the project that had become the symbol of their inclusive revolution. Upon entering her office, she found Morgan already waiting for her, a tired but satisfied smile on her face. "Good morning, boss," Morgan joked. "Ready for the big day?" Helen took a deep breath, unconsciously adjusting her blazer. "As ready as I can be." It's amazing to think of everything that happened to get us here. The two women spent a few minutes recalling the milestones of the past months, the approval of the Corporate Inclusion Act, largely based on the guidelines developed by Horizon Construction, the launch of the National Mentoring Program in Diversity, the transformation of dozens of companies that had followed their example. A soft knock on the door interrupted their thoughts. It was Amanda holding a folder and a tablet. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, entering the room, "but I thought you'd like to see this before the ceremony." Amanda showed them the tablet, where a video began to play. It was a compilation of testimonials, Horizon Construction employees, residents of the new complex, executives from other companies that had implemented inclusion policies. Each face, each story, was a living testimony to the impact of their work. Helen felt tears forming in her eyes. "Amanda, this is amazing, thank you." Amanda smiled, a noticeable change from the person she was a year ago. "I thought it would be a good reminder of why we're doing all this." The three women shared a moment of silence, each reflecting on her own journey of transformation. The sound of a new notification broke the silence. It was a message from Edward. "Meet me in the lobby in 10 minutes. We have a surprise before the ceremony." Intrigued, they went down to the building's main lobby. There, they found Edward animatedly conversing with a group of people. Among them, Helen recognized CEOs of other large construction companies, the Secretary of Labor, and even some familiar faces from politics. Edward saw them and gestured for them to approach. "Ah, there you are," he exclaimed, a gleam of excitement in his eyes. "Ladies, I'd like to introduce the National Committee for Inclusive Construction." Helen, Morgan, and Amanda exchanged surprised looks as Edward explained. The success of Horizon Construction had inspired the creation of an intersectoral committee dedicated to expanding the principles of inclusion to the entire civil construction sector of the country. "And guess who they want as main advisors?" concluded Edward, smiling at the three. The journey to the new Horizon complex was filled with animated discussions about the possibilities this new initiative opened up. Arriving at the location, they were greeted by an enthusiastic crowd, residents, employees, press, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the inauguration. The ceremony itself was a moment of profound emotion. Helen, cutting the inaugural ribbon, couldn't help but think of the reclusive woman she had been, fearful of showing her face to the world. Now, there she was, leading a revolution of inclusion and diversity. Morgan, always by her side, squeezed her hand in a gesture of silent support. The two exchanged a look that said more than 1,000 words: pride, gratitude, and the awareness of the long road traveled. Amanda, in charge of conducting the guests on a tour of the complex, shone in her new role. Her personal transformation was a living testimony to the power of mindset change. As the guests explored the complex, marveling at the innovations in accessibility and inclusive design, Helen was approached by a young woman in a wheelchair. "Mrs. Santos," said the young woman, her eyes shining with emotion, "I just wanted to thank you. Thanks to you all, I not only have an accessible home, but I also got my first job in a company that values my ability, not my disability." Helen felt her heart fill with an indescribable joy. This was what all the effort was worth, to change lives one person at a time. As the day progressed, it became clear that what they were celebrating was much more than the inauguration of a building. It was the birth of a new era, an era of inclusion, respect, and valuing diversity. At the end of the ceremony, Edward gathered Helen, Morgan, and Amanda for a private toast. "To Horizon Construction," he said, raising his glass, "and to the extraordinary women who transformed it into a beacon of hope and change." As the glasses clinked, Helen looked at her journey companions. Morgan, whose courage and vision had been the catalyst for all this. Amanda, whose personal transformation was a constant reminder of the power of openness to change. And Edward, whose unwavering support had made everything possible. "To building a future where everyone has a place," added Helen, her voice choked with emotion. As the sun set over the New Horizon complex, casting a golden glow over the city, Helen knew that this was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of something much greater. The legacy they were building, a legacy of inclusion, empathy, and equal opportunities, would continue to shape the future, long after the buildings they had constructed had turned to dust. And so, with hearts full of hope and renewed determination, Helen, Morgan, Amanda, and Edward looked to the horizon, ready to face the challenges that would come, knowing that together they were capable of moving mountains and building bridges, not just of concrete and steel, but of understanding and mutual respect. The future they had dreamed of was no longer a distant dream, but a reality under construction, brick by brick, life by life, transforming not just the urban landscape, but the very fabric of society. And so, the story of Horizon Construction, which began with fear and prejudice, ended as a beacon of hope and inclusion, illuminating the path to a more just and welcoming future for all. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Helen, Morgan, and the entire Horizon Construction team has touched your hearts and inspired reflection. To continue this journey of transformation and inclusion, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating and inspiring stories. Find it here by clicking on the link to the left. If this narrative resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of the human experience. Don't miss our upcoming content. We invite you to share in the comments your own experiences and reflections on inclusion and diversity in the workplace. Your stories might be the inspiration someone needs to begin their own journey of transformation. Together, we can build a future where each person, regardless of their physical characteristics or background, has the opportunity to shine and fully contribute to society. Thank you for being part of this community and for believing in the power of stories to change the world. Until next time, and remember, each one of us has the power to be an agent of change. May the story of Horizon Construction be just the beginning of many other stories of inclusion and transformation that you will create in your own lives and communities.